Another thing, I think in the last GIS session, some students were able to use the annotate feature on the presentation. So please try not to do that in this session. It disrupts the presentation, it disrupts the students. So it'd be great if you have any questions to just put them in the chat. Here are our goals for today. I will show you how to navigate ArcGIS.com. And then we'll turn a table, a CSV of data into a map layer. And then we'll also make a map with that layer that we create. But first things first, we'll do a bit of a GIS recap. So for those of you who missed the first session on GIS and we're a little bit confused about what GIS stands for, GIS is Geographic Information Science or Systems, depending on the context that you're using it in. So the system that we're using is ArcGIS, and then the whole field is Geographic Information Science. People use it to map people, places, and things. There are a lot of different use cases for GIS and mapping, and I've listed a few of them here. And again, many kinds of uses, there are many kinds of maps. So we'll start today with a little bit of a discussion. I'd like to know what maps you saw in your life this past week. So if anybody had any interesting maps that they saw, I think I need to stop sharing while I do this too. So just raise your hand if you have any interesting maps that you wanted to share and talk about. Bernice?
I usually see every day is like Google Maps or the Maps app, so I can locate where to go. But another one is that I have this geologic map in my room as a wallpaper, so I see that like every day. It's very cool because it's like this ancient and this cool topography. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's cool. Shreyan?
Yeah, I saw this thermal map. Like I was just goofing around and it just popped up in my webpage. And then like it looked a bit different than the other maps I've seen, red, orange, yellow, just new colors.
Yeah, cool.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of people in the chat are talking about Google Maps. Google Maps does count. Prisha?
So I've seen some pages in the National Geographic atlases. I think the most recent is probably the 8th or 9th, I think. But they have a lot of interesting maps inside at the city level. And as I'm particularly interested in SDG 11 and urban planning, looking at city level maps is quite intriguing because you can more specifically pinpoint certain problem areas, pollutant areas, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point too, of that it's not just global maps that you can look at. It's really important in our sort of work too to look at more local areas and maps too. Okay, if anyone else wants to share, the chat is open. I see a lot of people are sharing the maps that they saw in there too, so that's great. Thank you. And then more of a GIS recap. Let's see what you remember from this first session. I know that it was a couple of weeks ago, but can anyone tell me what a map projection is, or sort of explain it in your own words? Prisha, is that still a hand up for this question?
Yes. So a projection could be kind of, I forgot the specific definition, but I
Mhm.
think it would take a flat or plane surface of any part of Earth and then you project it onto a map.
Yeah, Bernice, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. She covered a lot, but basically, since the Earth is like, round, this sphere shape, we're not able to really project it into this flat surface. So we have so many different map projections that tries to cover the area, like Mercator, bones, and some of them with such like weird shapes. Like one of them was this butterfly shape, and
Mhm.
it's very cool.
Yeah, true. Okay, great. And one more question. Does anyone remember what the two types of GIS data are? Hahang?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
The two types of data are, can you find it? Sorry.
No problem. Take your time.
Sorry, let's get some answers first.
Amukta?
The two types of data would be like vectors, as in like lines and like polygons, and then the other ones are, I believe, made of pixels. I think I don't know what they're called. Oh, the chat says raster, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Great, cool. And just as a bonus for anyone who saw an interesting map with data, if you can tell me what kind of data that was on the map that you saw in this past week. So I think someone mentioned weather maps. What kind of data would that be? Gianna?
I saw a radar map this past week and it had data on like rain and clouds and storms that are coming.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So would that be a raster or a vector?
A raster.
Yes, nice. Brandon, do you have something else to add?
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm.
I use the app Find My.
Mm-hmm. Me
So
too.
like, would that count? Like the people you see, would that count as data technically?
Yeah, definitely. So would you say that those are raster data or vector data?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question. So if it's location data and they're points on the map, would you agree that they are like little dots on the map, little points of where your friends and where your
hmm
items are? Yeah,
hmm
so would that be raster or vector? That's okay. No problem. Prisha, is that a question that you want to answer?
I was gonna propose a different map.
Okay.
So I saw a thermal map, and I believe it's raster because it's taking data from satellite imagery.
Yeah, great. Yeah. And then to go back to the Find My question, so I guess technically it could be a little bit of both. So there's the base map, and that has all of the sort of the locations, like all of the country boundaries and things like that. So that technically isn't the data part, but the data part are the points on the map that you're keeping track of. So that would be a vector, which I think someone in the chat did mention. So Great. Back to sharing my screen. Okay. Here's the recap again. So as everyone mentioned, there's raster and a vector. Raster is, like Shreya said, they're pixels. So you can see all of the different grids in this example here. Every pixel or cell corresponds to a different value. And then there's vectors, so there's points, lines, and polygons. Yeah, in the case of Find My, all of the locations are points. And I don't think there are any like lines or polygons that you could add as data to that kind of map. But yeah, just a reminder if there are any, if it's a discrete thing that you're mapping that has a specific latitude and longitude and they're points on a map, then those are vectors. So in the first session, I showed you a demo of the dashboard that we'll be creating throughout the summer. But I wanted to quickly go through the kinds of data that we'll be going through in the next few weeks as well. So the first one is the marine microplastics data from NOAA. This data set is really cool because they have their own sort of interactive map. So NOAA created their own sort of map viewer for this data set. And if you click on the link, I'll share it in the chat. You can see all of the different ways that they allow you to interact with the data set. So you can see all of the different concentrations of microplastics, the measurements that they have here. So that's what this legend is here. And you can see the different points on the map, the different kinds of points on the map, depending on what the concentration of microplastics is. They have a tab for data information. So if you click on any of the features, any of the specific features, you can sort of look at the information in that point. And then the most important part is the data table, because I think from here, you're able to export the table. So you can sort of add a filter to this data set. So there are a lot of points, I think maybe over, I don't know, maybe over 5,000, maybe more than that. But if you want to filter the data set, you can choose different dates. So it goes all the way back to 1972, which is a huge data set. But you can change that. It's a little glitchy right now. But yeah, you can change the year and a specific date, and then add that filter, and then this table changes. So I'm just showing you because in the data sets that you find, they may or may not have something similar already where you can sort of filter the data and then export the table. Sometimes you'll just have an export button. But here, NOAA made it really easy for people to navigate where you can do different filters, and then the table that shows up is you're able to export it. So if you go to actions, you can go to export, and then there are these different options. we're not going to focus on JSON or GeoJSON data types here, but we can send a little bit more information on different sort of file types that you can have for GIS. We'll just focus on sort of the more basic sort of tables and things like that. So from here, I would export it to a CSV and then add it to ArcGIS Online. But before we do that, I'll go over a few of the other data sets that we'll be working with. For that dashboard, we also have the polygons of the marine and coastal protected areas. They also sort of have their own map, but the way that we obtain the layers, it's already on ArcGIS Online, so we don't really have to do anything with that. But as you can see in this map, there are all of these little blue and green polygons for the different kinds of protected areas throughout the world. The next couple of data sets we won't be working with on the dashboard, but we will have a cartography lesson just so that we can sort of show you all of the different ways that you can display different kinds of vector and raster data sets. So we have also the major rivers of the world from the World Bank. So you can see all of these vector lines of all of the major rivers around the world. And then this is a raster data set from satellite imagery. It is the coral bleaching heat stress alert area. So you can see all of the oceans. Every part of the ocean has a different color. Blue is that there's no heat stress, so there's no alert for a coral bleaching in that area, but it goes all the way up to the sort of dark purple for where it's been abnormally warm in the ocean that day, and there might be a risk of coral bleaching. So with that, I'll go straight into the demo, but maybe if anyone has any questions about GIS in general from the first session, anything that you want me to sort of reiterate, now is your chance to ask some of those questions for about 5 minutes, maybe.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Hi,
Hello.
do you have a
We are
question?
like,
Yes.
yes, we do. About this coral bleaching
Mm-hmm.
alerts level. We have a question about the coral bleaching alert levels.
Okay.
You said something about when they turn purplish. What does that mean?
Where they, sorry, can you repeat that last part?
When they turn purple, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I will, let me share my screen again. So we'll go over this data set again a little bit later, but just, I guess, a preview of it. So this organization, they have different satellite images for the temperature of the oceans. And then from that, they'll extract what they think is too warm for coral reefs. And then they'll change the value of those pixels to a color depending on what the warning is. So, for example, yellow section, they have determined that that temperature that they found on the satellite image is a little bit too warm for coral reefs to survive. And so they said that those areas need to be a little bit monitored more closely than other areas because it's been warmer there. And so there's a chance of coral bleaching. That's just sort of a preview of that data set. there are a lot of other raster data sets that you'll see in life too. And I think if you have questions about those, you can look at the legend, and then you can also sort of there should be sort of like a data source for that sort of map that you're looking at, and then you can look that up and then get more information on it. Shriyan, question?
Yeah, so during the first GIS tutorial session, I think you gave us last year's winners and all, like what they created last year. So I went through some of them, and a few of them got like a circular 3D view of Earth, and I've been trying to get that on my platform, but I wasn't able to figure out how.
Yeah, okay. I won't go through that in this session, but I will add maybe in the Google Classroom, I'll have a sort of list of the different kinds of resources. And so I'll find sort of a tutorial on how to do that, and I'll add a link to it there so that you
Yeah,
can.
like it's like a 3D Earth, and it zooms across different countries. And
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
but when I add a map through a sidecar, it only comes in on like a 2D map.
Okay, yeah, I'll take a look and I'll send you some more information on that.
Yeah, thanks.
Zarella, you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could show an example of what a polygon would look like on the vector map, because I feel like that's the only part where I'm confused about the difference between the two.
Yeah, so the difference between a polygon vector and like a raster.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's a good question. I'll share my screen again and sort of just go through that. So I think it's more about the way that the information is stored than it is about the actual thing itself. So what's probably confusing about this is that it's a raster, but there are different areas that could be sort of different polygons. But the way that this information is stored is within sort of a grid system. So if I clicked on any of these pixels, not here because this is just a screenshot, but I would have a certain value, and that value is only attributed to that one location and that one pixel on the map. However, if these were polygons, like this data set, if you clicked on polygon, it would sort of highlight the whole polygon, and that data set is sort of stored in that sort of polygon shape. So in a raster, every location has a value, but then in a vector where it's a polygon, it's just those areas. And then when you click on it, that specific polygon has its own set of information and data. And maybe while we go through some of sort of these demos and things like that, it might there might be a better understanding as you actually like get to play with the data and things like that. So I think that's all for questions for now. I'll just go straight into the demo on arcgis.com. So this is what your homepage probably looks like. There are these tabs on the top. The only one that I really go to is content and organization, but you don't have to worry about organization. I think as soon as you get to your homepage, the first thing you want to do is go to content. So this is where all of your map layers and your maps and your story map and your dashboards and things like that, that's where all of that lives here. You can sort of, there are different filters on the side. So if, for example, you made a map and you can't find it, but there are a lot of different things in your content, you can just sort of filter for a web map. There aren't a lot of layers and things like that in this account, but when you start playing around with the data, you'll have some layers and maps. Yeah, that's sort of the most basic thing that you need to know about arcgis.com. So once you sign in, you'll have your home page, and then you'll go straight into your content, and you can start creating content and organizing and making maps and things from here. So if I wanted to create a layer from a table, from a CSV file, there are a few things that are important. So this is a subset of the microplastics data set that I just showed from NOAA. The most important thing is that your data set has location information. So everyone can see this table, right? I think you should be able to. As you can see, it's a data table of a lot of different information for each point on the map. But the most important thing is that it has these two columns. So a latitude and a longitude column. This data set, some data sets will only have sort of like country boundaries or sorry, a column for countries or a column for states or things like that you can also use. For example, here, this just says the ocean, so you could sort of map it that way, where each ocean has a different information, but because we do have the specific latitude and longitude, we're able to map every single point and where they are. So I'm just going to, from the content page, create a new item here. They make it really easy for you. There are all of these like questions and things like that, and sort of steps for making all of these things, which is really helpful. So it says drag and drop your file or choose an option. So I'm just going to drag and drop that CSV table. So again, they ask you, how would you like to add this file? And there are two different options. So you can add it just as a CSV file, and then it lives in your ArcGIS account as a file, but you can't really do anything with it. What you would need to do is turn your data set into a hosted feature layer or table. So that's this first option. And they give you descriptions of what each of those things, each of those options are, which is helpful too. So then it'll sort of go through your table and pick out the different column names. So all of the different field names. These on the left, sorry. On the left here, these are the actual field names that are in your table. And you can sort of decide which fields you want to sort of transfer onto your feature layer that will be on the map. So for example, if I don't need, if I don't care about what the subregion of the ocean is or whatever, I can turn that off, and then the final layer won't have that data. But I'll just keep all of these fields in the data set. You can also change like the display names if you want to change any of that, and then the type of data. So if it's a number, it'll be an integer or a double. I won't go through the specifics of what the different sort of number and types of data are, but I'll if you're interested, I'll have a link to an explanation of the different kinds of data. But oh, sorry, I just dropped something. yeah, so just making sure that all the fields that you want in your table are being transferred onto your layer. So I'll click next. And then this is important too. So it asks you how you know where the location is in the file. There are different different ways to do that. So again, it's really great that this data set has latitude and longitude because we can just plot those points on a map. But sometimes a data set will have addresses or place names. And then the GIS system will look through those addresses or place names and then sort of decide where those points are based on that. This is important. It says this sort of option may consume credits. So every account will have, I don't remember how many credits we have, but if you do choose addresses or place names and it'll consume credits to find out the location, it'll tell you how many credits it uses. And then if you don't have enough, you can email us and then we can look into different options for that. But again, this is very simple. It has just latitude and longitude. This data set is kind of funny because it has sort of different fields for latitude and longitude. So it has an X and a Y field, but it also says latitude and longitude. So I'm just going to use that just to make things a little bit simple. I'm not sure why it's different. And then I'll click next. And then you can create a title. Microplastics by Noah. And then I'll save that. And then what it will do is it will look at those latitude and longitudes and put those points on a map here. So it will take you to this page, which is what's called an item detail page. And this itself is just one layer. So if you go into any of these tabs, you can sort of see more information about the layer that you just made. Maybe quickly just to show you the visualization, just to show that there are now points on a map. So what the system did was it took those latitude and longitude points and figured out where to put them on a map. So if I click on any of these points, you can see that it has all of the information from that table. And if you wanted to look at any of the information from that table, you can go into the data tab. And this is basically just like that whole table. So all of the information from that CSV is stored in that layer. There are also different settings. So one setting that I recommend everyone use is this delete protection. I'll check this on. So if you don't have this on, you might be able to accidentally delete your layer. But if you go into your settings and then add delete protection, you won't be able to accidentally delete it, which will be great. And there are all these other settings that you can add. So editing, if you want to allow other people to edit that layer, you can add that, but I don't think that anyone will really be needing to edit any of the layers. And then there's this export data. So I would sort of just keep the default settings, but add the delete protection. And you can go through and read these other ones and see if you want to add them or not. In terms of the exporting data setting, you might have to just look at the data set that you have. The data provider will usually have a terms of use section. So you can sort of see if you are allowed to sort of share that data set here or not. And if anyone has any trouble with sort of going through the terms of use and things like that, you can send us the data set and we'll help you figure that out. Okay, so this is the item for just one layer. So it's a layer, it's not on a map yet. If you want to create a map, the tab that you'll go to is this map tab, but you can also open the layer in map viewer. So there are sort of a couple different ways to add this layer to a map. But I think just to get started, I'll start from scratch and I'll go to the map tab. And this will open up a blank map. So sort of going back to the raster and vector data type distinction. This is what is a base map. So this doesn't have any information on it. For example, if you like click anywhere, I can't click on any of the pixels and I can't get any information. It's sort of just like a picture. So this is sort of just a raster that's being served as a base map. And when you start a map, you can choose what kind of base map you want. Here, so there are all these options on the side. You can expand it to sort of see what these all say. You can change the base map. So there's an imagery base map. Again, it doesn't have any sort of data on it. So again, if I click, there's no value that pops up. But there are all of these different sort of options for the different base maps, and you can sort of decide which is the best for the data set that you're using. So the data set that we're adding is that microplastics layer. So I'll do the oceans base map. And then from the section layers here, I can go through all of the layers in my account and sort of add the ones that I want. So add, browse layers. It'll automatically go to your content and then I can add that layer that I just created to the map. So now we can see that all of the points are on this map that I have. Again, this is just a subsection of those points. I think I just did the past 2 or 3 months, the last 2 or 3 months of the data set. And just to give myself a little bit more room, I'll just collapse that sidebar. And you can change all of these different things about that layer. So actually one thing that is important is that if you go into your layers tab, you want to make sure that the layer you're working on is active. And you can tell by this sort of blue, this little blue strip on the side of the layer. So you can see if I turn the layer off, I'm not working on any layers, and then I don't have any options on the right for that layer itself. So just make sure that the layer that you're working on has this little blue strip. And these are the different things that you can do to that layer. So under styles, this is where you can change how the points themselves look. If there's a specific field or a column of data that you want to display. So for example, measurement is the sort of measurements of the different points or the different, the amount of microplastics in each point. You can sort of styled those points based on the data itself. So you can see in the legend, the bigger the measurement, the bigger the point. And you can sort of go through and change all of these settings. For some reason, I think it might just be taking a while to load. Yeah, okay, so you can see that these points here are bigger because of the measurement that's within them. So if I change any of these settings, I'll just go from 0 so that all of the points are on the map too. I'm going to change the size range to just so that those points show up on the map. So one reason why the points that were around the US aren't showing up anymore is maybe because those points don't have data for that field. So let me actually see. And if that's the case, you can turn off whatever style that you had, and then you can click on these points and then see what the actual data has. So let's close that. So this specific point, yeah, there is no measurement data. So that's why the point wasn't showing up when I selected a field. But all of these should have the sampling method. So that's the way that we symbolized this layer on our map. So I'll go ahead and do that. Sampling method, and then now all of the points should have a different symbol. And then within the styles, you can also change the different options. So if you go into style options, you can change how big or how small the points are. You can change the color. So if you click on here, it shows you the current symbol, which is a point, and then it shows you how big the size of that point is. And then if I make it bigger, then those points on the map get a little bit bigger. And then I can change any of these other sort of options for the points. I'll make this one bigger too. So that is what's called the symbology. And you can look at the legend to see how it'll show up on your map. So we're symbolizing it by the sampling method. So it is handpicking and Houston net. And you can see that red is handpicking and then blue is the net. So that's the way that you can differentiate between the data points. The other thing that you can change about these points is how these pop-ups look. So if you click on any of the points, the data information here is what's called a pop-up. And that can be changed here. So right now, it's just a list of all of the fields that are within your data set. So it has all of the information from that table in each point. But you can also make it a little bit more personalized by adding a text box. So this is the text box. If you want to add information from any of the fields, you will add the field name in these brackets. So if I wanted the pop-up to say the date of the point, I would put the field name date in these brackets. And then when I scroll to the text part, you can see that the date of that specific point shows up in your pop-up. And just to clean this up a little bit, I'll take out the fields list. So in the ellipses and the options, you can sort of delete the default setting for the pop-ups. And now you can see that the pop-up only has what I put in this text box. And then when I edit the text, I can add some more information. So if I wanted the ocean that it's in and the subregion, I can put that information. And when I click OK, again, you can see that shows up in your pop-up. And you can play around with sort of the size and things of this too when you're making your map. You can sort of put things in bold and add some more information. So let's see if your data point doesn't have a value for that specific field, it just will have it blank. So for example, that this one point doesn't have a subregion. So even though our pop-up says to add the subregion, because it doesn't have data there, it won't show up in your pop-up. So that's that. If you want to change the title too, so this is the top of the pop-up, this title, you can change it here. I think in our map, we had that as the date. So I'll add it there, and then you can see the field that you put in your title becomes the title of the pop-up here. And again, you can play around with your text box and make it look a little bit nicer and add whatever information that you want in there. So those are the two things that you'll really need to change about the layer that's in your map. So the styles, again, are how the points or lines or polygons in your map will look. And then the pop-ups are how the information looks when you click on any of your data. I also wanted to show a place where you can find data that's already on ArcGIS online. I'm not sure if the Esri team talked about the Living Atlas at all when they were showing you about story maps. But ArcGIS.com has their own sort of repository of data that's on the Living Atlas. And you can sort of browse those layers when you add a layer to your map. So if you go to add and then browse layers, the default is all of the layers in your content. But if you go and change the location of where you want to look at layers, you can go to Living Atlas. And then you can see that there are all of these different kinds of layers that are already made for you. So you don't have to sort of find a CSV file or a table and then add it. It's already on ArcGIS for you to use. So that is what the protected areas are from. So you can do a search for whatever data set you're looking for. I wanted to find the protected areas polygons. So I'll add it from the Living Atlas to my map. And it's sort of a big data set. So it might take a while for all of it to load. But again, you want to make sure that the layer that you're working on is highlighted in blue on the side so that you know that that's the layer you're working on. Some of the layers on the Living Atlas, you're able to change the style of. And sometimes the layer has like two different parts. So this layer has points and polygons. So if I wanted to change how either of them look, I would have to click on them specifically. So you can change the way that these points look with the styles, and then you can also change the way the polygons look and the pop-ups and things like that too. Let me see if I'm missing anything. If you want to look at the data sets within the Living Atlas in sort of a bigger screen, I'll add a link to it. But you can just go to ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World, click on Browse, and then you can browse all of these different layers that are in the Living Atlas. So you can search for a theme or anything like that, and then all of these layers are available for you to use. On our SDGs Today website, there are also a lot of different layers that we host that you can use too. So if you go to sdgstoday.org, we have data sets by SDG. We have a few for SDG 14, Life Underwater, and you could go through and use any of these data sets too. So we already have the microplastics here already on ArcGIS Online. And this is the dashboard that I showed. So what we did this week was we made this map. And you can make it look however you want it to look. But if you wanted to access any of the data, you can go into the Access Data tab here and click on ArcGIS products or the underlying data set. And then if you go to ArcGIS products, it'll take you to the layers that are on ArcGIS Online, and then you can add that to your map. It's a little bit slow right now, but I'll go back to our map. When you're done making your map, you just want to make sure to save it. It's a little bit slow right now, sorry. I'm just going to exit out of that. Yeah, so if you expand it here, all of these options are for your map itself, and then you can save it as a map. Marine microplastics. I guess another thing that I'll add is if you're using a layer that's already on ArcGIS Online, either through SDGs Today or through the Living Atlas, you can set a filter for them. So for here, the polygons, these are all of the protected areas on the land and things like that. But if you highlight that layer and then go to filter, you can add a filter so that you only have what you want shown on the map. I want it to be the marine data set. So here, if it's a marine protected area, it has a value of 1 or 2. So I want to take out the ones that have a value of 0. And I'll say marine is not 0. And then once you add the filter, again, it'll probably take a while since it's such a big data set, but it'll take out all of these polygons that are not a marine data set. And I know that that was a lot of information. I think it probably just takes a little bit of tinkering around with the software itself to really understand and like get the lay of the land. What we'll do is we'll have this same table that we used for the demo today. We'll have it for you to download so that you can use just this subsection of data to sort of play around and make your own map just to practice. So we'll have that available on the Google Classroom. And you'll have access to this video as well. And we'll also have a couple of office hours sections too, if you start playing around with things and things get confusing. Let me stop sharing my screen. I know that there are a couple students here who were in previous EcoMaster programs in previous years. So if you have, not to call you all out, but if you have any tips and tricks or anything that you learned through this process last year that you want to share, feel free to raise your hand and give some advice to people. But also, if there are any questions, let me know. I know, again, that was a lot of information. Does anyone want to talk about the project that they want to work on? And maybe we can sort of go through and see if we can find a data set or anything. Sarah?
Hi, yeah, I'd just like to ask about the data that you showed us. So how did you manage to get it? Are we supposed to find our own data also for our projects?
Yeah, you should find your own data set, but we have a bunch of resources for you to sort of look through too. I think for that one, we sort of just went on Google and searched like marine microplastics, and then we found that data set. And then you can just download it straight from that website.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then maybe in the Google Classroom too, we can sort of have a section where everyone can share the data sources that they found so that everyone can share and look through together. Shreyan?
Yeah, I would just like to share what I was going to do for our project. So I wanted to focus on SDGs 6 and 14. So like how microplastic and plastic pollution is affecting our biodiversity and ecosystems and our health and well-being, and how like it also covers SDG 6 as these microplastics can get into our drinking water. And then so I wanted to kind of club the two SDGs together for and discuss or like provide information in my story map regarding microplastic pollution and their implications on today's world.
Nice. That's great. Yeah, it's always interesting when there are so many SDGs and they all link together. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they the two that you chose will connect with each other.
Yeah.
Bernice?
Yeah, so I'm trying to input a map right now into the location settings of latitude and longitude, but when I click on a field, it doesn't have an option for latitude or longitude, so it's not like allowing me to insert the map.
And the data set that you have, it does have that information in the columns.
Yeah, it's the microplastic one.
Oh, okay.
But then I chose it for like a specific university.
Oh, okay. Do you want to maybe share your screen for a minute
Yeah.
and see if we can troubleshoot really quickly?
So this is what I have, and then it doesn't give me an option for.
Okay, and then can you press on the back button?
Yeah.
And then scroll down. Oh, I see. Okay, so scroll down more, or sorry. I saw
Oh, that's all.
there was one field that says lawn lat.
Oh,
Okay.
this one?
Mm-hmm. If you change the type, I guess you
Oh,
can't.
this only?
Yeah, that's okay. So there are different ways that different data sets have the latitude and longitude information. This one has it in one column. So before you add it to ArcGIS Online, you'll probably just have to split that column into two. So have the latitude in one column and then have the longitude in a separate column.
Oh, okay. How do you split it?
Yeah, so there are different ways. I think if it's is it an Excel sheet? If it's
Oh,
in,
let me open it up.
maybe I'll have a link to how to sort of split up a cell there too.
Oh, got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so that's a great question. So if your data set has your latitude and longitude in one column, before you put it in ArcGIS Online, let's just split it into two. Nihal?
For example, if we want a certain data set but we can't find it online, is there anything we can do?
You can, I guess there are a couple things. One is you can post in the Google Classroom the kind of data set that you're looking for, and then maybe someone will have information on where to find it. Or you can also create the data set yourself if you have the information. So you can open up like a blank Excel sheet, and then if you have the information that's not in a table, like in different pages and things like that, then you can sort of create your own table and then upload that. And if it's also like a local a local data set that you're like collecting, then you can also collect data from your environment too. Maybe
No, because
next section.
I want a data set on the number of vessels or ships in the sea from like 2010 to 2024 over a timeline. So I tried looking for the data set, but I couldn't find it anywhere.
Okay, yeah, we'll take a look ourselves too and see if we find anything. And then as any of the other students find their own data sets, if they find something similar, we'll post it in the classroom too. Nikita?
Hi, I was wondering if I could talk like for my project about one of the SDGs that like isn't like one of the main ones we're focusing on, because I kind of want to talk about SDG 12 a little bit, which is like the responsible consumption and production, and kind of like greenwashing a little bit.
Yeah, I think if the SDG that you're focusing on isn't 6 or 14, I think as long as it has some element of oceans, rivers, or microplastics in it, then I think you'll be able to do that project. And we'll look through the project submissions too and see if there's any other comments that we have for each specific project.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Christabel? Oh, you're on mute.
I was thinking of doing project 16 and 13. So I can't find any story maps on those. So what am I gonna do?
Yeah, so to find data sets, one thing that I have learned with research projects is that sometimes you'll have to change the project that you have depending on the kind of data set that you find. So you can look at different organizations that do work on those specific SDGs and see what data they have. You can look on the SDGs Today website for any data sets that might be helpful for you there. And then also on the Living Atlas. So I would say it might be helpful to have sort of a broad idea of what your project is. And then once you start finding data sets, sort of altering your project idea based on what is actually available.
Okay.
Baswar?
Hello. I was telling that I have an idea about both SDG about SDG 6 and SDG 14. So can I include both of them in my project?
Yeah, of course. You can include as many SDGs as you want, as long as they're again in the realm of oceans, rivers, water bodies, and microplastics. But I would also say try not to make your project too complex. Maybe before the next section, which is GIS analysis, we can sort of talk about project ideas that are good, sort of, and sort of too complex or too simple project ideas. Ale?
So I'm willing to work on with SDG 6. So I was asking, is there any information on how to use GIS along by any chance?
Sorry, what was the last part of your question?
I'm asking about how to like I'm willing to work with SDG 6. So is there any information on how to use GIS along with it?
Yeah, so I think it depends on again, the sort of data that you find. There is a lot of GIS data for that specific data set. If you have a general idea of what you want your project to be, you can look at the data sets that we have. And then we'll have a little bit more information on how to use GIS. You'll have access to this recording, and then you can also look at any of the other tutorials that we'll post too.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So I think we just have time for one more question. But before we get to that, I'll just say that the next session will be on GIS analysis. So if you have time before then to sort of go through ArcGIS Online yourself and tinker around with it a little bit and get familiar with it, that would be helpful. And if you're having problems with your account, we will try to fix that in the next day or two. Shreyan, you have the last question.
Yeah, so I noticed that like during every week we have like 2 to 3 sessions, but then all the recordings get sent at the end of the like the end of the week. Is it possible like after each session we could get the recording? Because it'll also save time. Like I wanted to go through the first GIS recording again so that I could like go through how to use GIS again, but it wouldn't come till the end of the third session. So could we get the recordings after each session?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that'll be helpful definitely for at least the GIS week, since this is a pretty GIS heavy week. So we'll try to get you this recording at the end of the session,
Yeah, thanks.
or by the end of the day today.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're excited to look through all of the project ideas that you have. And we'll post all of the resources and things that I mentioned today on Google Classroom. And we'll see you on Wednesday.
Thank you, Anala. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.